Wanted to explain, originally our next presenter was going to have a presentation, but we changed the format to accommodate some new life changes that she has coming up. She will have an addition to the family very soon, and so we thought it would be better if we started out with a conversation that she and I would have to make sure that some of the key points on our next topic come out, but then also give you guys an opportunity to ask questions after we finish the initial part of the conversation. So this is one of those interactive portions of our agenda today. And the topic is QA self-study designation and transition. And so we'll talk about that for the next 30 minutes, and then we'll move forward with lunch. So I have with me Miki Klein, and I'm going to ask Miki to introduce herself to you. I know many of you have corresponded with her either via email or telephone, and you get an opportunity to put a face with that correspondence. So Miki?
Thank you. My name is Miki Klein, obviously, and I've been with NASBA for a little bit over a year now. I'm an instructional design administrator. I work with Johnny Owsley on basically all things self-study. I have a background in education of about 13 years, where I've worked in anything from classroom learning to governmental learning to outreach and education, accessible technology for people in communication and learning. I have a very varied background. And now I'm here at NASBA with instructional design, and I love it.
All right, well, thank you, Miki. So we know you have a host of experience and even some new experience in working with these transitions that have happened with the designations and so forth. So let's jump right into the first question. As it relates to the CPE standard, my understanding is that one of the most significant areas that's impacted is self-study. And if you could, would you share with us the changes and give us your perspective on those?
As far as the administration around the transition and self-study programs, we have taken two programs. We have QAS self-study and we have the National Registry self-study. And they've been separated by a few criterion in the past. If you are both, you know what those criterion are. If you are one, you probably have heard about them. And what we've done with those new standards is the committee has merged those, but brought the registry self-study standards up to the level of the QAS self-study standards. And that basically eliminates the need for two different programs.
Great. So why did the committee decide to merge the two programs?
Well, they're merged because right now there's no regulatory reason any longer to have two different administrative processes with the programs. We have QAS, there were administrative differences in the timing of renewals, in the payment of renewals and in initial applications than there were with, compared to the National Registry processes. And so what we've done is we've merged the two and created a new designation, which is now going to be called QAS self-study.
Great. And that makes a lot of sense to me, kind of cutting through some of the red tape and streamlining the process in a sense. So if I were a CPE sponsor, how would I go about getting QAS self-study designation?
We have initiated a transition process, and that transition process is important for all of our self-study sponsors. That includes both the registry self-study sponsors and the QAS self-study sponsors. Everyone is required to go through this process. This process is for us to ensure that the revised standards have been put into your programs, that all of your programs do meet that criterion of the new revised standards. When you start the process for the transition with us, or really before you start the process, we highly recommend that you review all of your programs to ensure that you are compliant with the revised standards. Once you're comfortable that you have come to the level of the revised standards and all of your programs are compliant, you can go onto our website at learningmarket.org and you can fill out a QAS self-study transition initiation form. Once we get that transition initiation form, we're going to pretty quickly turn it back around and ask you for a program list of all of your self-study programs. And depending on your offerings, the number of the offerings that you have and your offering level within self-study, we will ask for one or more of your programs, as well as a few other bits of information.
Miki, you referenced earlier that you have a partner that you work with, Johnny Owsley. And Johnny's back. Johnny, would you wave? So lunch is next, so if you have questions for Miki or Johnny during lunch, you can also ask then. But what are you and Johnny looking for as a part of the review process?
Well, in the review process for the transition, we're not going to be asking you for your certificate of completion or your promotional materials. What we will ask you for is a copy of the author and reviewer's resume. We will ask you for access to the program or a copy of the program. And we're going to ask you for copies of your final examination, review questions, and the answer key to both. We really want to make sure that your course is compliant with the new standards, and your course is also going to be reviewed for content. So it will be sent to a content reviewer, an expert in the field of the chosen program.
Okay, so really what you're doing is confirming that the revised standards are being implemented as it relates particularly to CPE program.
Yes,
Is that
sir.
right?
Yes, sir. The other requirements, such as your certificate of completion or your promotional materials, those things will be reviewed, but it will be reviewed in the typical desk audit process as that comes up for your specific sponsorship.
Okay, so when should a CPE sponsor apply for QAS self-study designation?
Well, approvals for the QAS self-study designation were available on July 1st of this year. That's when the new standards became effective, and that's when we were able to actually begin the approval process. If you have programs already in existence as of December 31st of 2011, you have until March 1st of 2014 to ensure that those programs are compliant and that you have gone through the transition with us. We are asking that if you have a number of programs and you're going through each one of them, that you take your time to do that to ensure that they are compliant, and that you come to us no later than January 1st of 2014 to apply for the transition. That will give us ample time to do the reviews that we need to do before that cutoff date of March 1st.
So is the process pretty easy in terms of the transition?
Many of our approved sponsors have not had their programs reviewed in quite some time by NASBA. And what we're finding at this point is that some of the programs we're looking at were not compliant with the 2012 standards, but they also weren't necessarily compliant with the 2002 standards, the set of standards right before this revision. And that we need these programs to be compliant with the 2012 standards.
That doesn't sound real well. So what happens if a QAS self-study designation is denied? Then what happens?
We're most definitely making sure that all of the programs are compliant with the standards. What will happen after that is if you're denied, we ask that you go back, review your programs again, all of them, to make sure that you are compliant. When we deny a program, we'll send you a list of the reports that we typically send out that will have the findings, our suggestions, what you need to do, and apply those toward all of your programs, just to make sure that you are in fact compliant whenever it comes to the new standards. And once you're confident that you've gotten to the compliance step, you can come back to us, back on Learning Market, to reapply for that transition.
Okay. So you guys will work with me until I can get there, in other words.
That's what we do.
Okay, great. Those are all of the questions that I want to ask right now. Would love to open it up to those of you who are living this every day and give you an opportunity for questions. There are microphones that will be floating around, and we'll just answer those.
Is there a checklist of the things that you're looking for in terms of compliance that we could, on the front side use to make sure our programs are compliant?
We don't necessarily have a checklist. When I speak with people about compliance with the standards and the new standards, while there is a level of, while these standards do allow you to interpret what you're reading, they're also more, this doesn't really make much sense, I don't think, but more defined. Because in standard number 8, you can go through and say, do the review questions have evaluative feedback? Is that evaluative feedback, does it explain exactly why that question's not, or that answer was not correct? It tells you about reinforcement feedback. Does that review question tell you why that answer was correct? If you go through that standard, you should be able to hit all of those high marks. And the way the standards have been arranged this time, there are sections within Standard 8 that will help you go through to ensure that each thing is marked off for you.
Compliance audits outside of this, kind of basically self-registration or self-reporting type of approach?
Compliance audits, as far as the revisions to the standards,
As a follow-up to registration, you do any kind of surprise audits to say, yeah, you represented all these things when you registered. We wanted to come back separately from that and do some update compliance.
yes, sir. We do have what we call desk audits they're random every year, and I know that the numbers of those are going up each year, that our auditors and our managers, our account managers, they are having to do more and more of those every year. So I'll be surprised if everybody in here doesn't have one at least once in the next few years.
With the changeover with QAS, is there any states that have come back saying that they're not going to accept the combination?
No, and the reason that the new designation is titled QAS Self-Study is because there are some states, specifically Tennessee, that require CPAs to have a QAS course as their self-study CPE credit. That's why we left that in, so that the state jurisdictions that do have that requirement don't have to go through any regulatory changes or rule changes in order for people to be able to utilize this new transition.
And that's why we're also doing such a robust transition process to also help satisfy state boards that we are doing due diligence to ensure that the programs are compliant with the 2012 standards. So that in the past, QAS had a approved program list, but now with the QAS self-study designation, if you get that QAS self-study designation, all your self-study courses are deemed QAS courses. So it was very important that we had a rigorous review process, and that's why everyone's having to go through it to give the state boards that peace of mind that there are truly compliant courses out there.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Jessica Luttrull, by the way. She's the manager of the Registry department within NASBA. I think we had a question in the middle. Yeah.
QAS, because I know a number of states don't require QAS.
Yes, it's on Learning Market. It is on Learning Market. Mm-hmm.
Is that searchable where a person could just search and find it on Learning Market?
It is searchable. If you want to meet us out in the lobby, there's a Learning Market. There's a computer set up that we can kind of show you where some of that is.
Hey. We're currently a National Registry sponsor, just Group Live. So when we're applying for the self-study, because we're certainly going to launch that soon, do we still use our number and stuff for that, or do we have to start over?
You will. but once you submit your additional delivery method application, you will actually already be applying for your self-study, your QAS self-study designation as your additional delivery method. So you won't have to go through this transition
Right.
the way some of the current providers will. But yes, your number won't change. Your
Because I
number
know
will
we
just be
looked at
assigned.
this a few years ago, and there was that ADM application and all that stuff. Is that still on the
Yes.
website? Okay.
It is. It's still a learning market.
If we're a QAS provider, do we need to register our QAS courses for the transition, or just the ones that are self-study registry?
All of them.
All of them? Okay.
All of them. That's what you're going to be doing. All current QAS providers and all current registry self-study providers have to go through this transition. And if you're both, then just list all of your courses.
I have a question on is there any application of the QAS self-study rules to independent study credit?
No. I'll let Jessica take it.
For independent study, you really need to go to specifically to state boards. There are very few state boards that will actually recognize independent study CPE credits. So you almost have to go state by state and see which state boards would actually accept those.
Okay, thank you.
You had mentioned earlier that if we were denied, we had to reapply. Do you basically start from step one all over again?
Yes, we do. Whenever you send in your next transition initiation form, we'll do the same thing again. We'll send you an email. We'll say we need your course list, and you can send us your course list. Once we get the course list, we'll pick out one or more courses to review, and it will not be the same course that we reviewed the first time. We'll pick a different course and then ask you for the reviewer's bio or resume, as well as the author's resume and access to the course.
Any other questions? Got one over here.
If you're a current QAS provider and you currently have the 3-digit number, when you're going throughout the transition, will you maintain that 3-digit or will you get the new 6-digit number? How does that work?
You will be given a registry number. Whenever you go through the transition, your QAS number will no longer be valid.
Okay, so the standards aren't going to be applied till 2014, right? The new standards. They
No, the
don't need to be-
standards are current. The revised standards
Yeah.
became current.
So the standards
throughout
that were just released are not going to be fully effective until 2014.
Correct.
Right.
We're kind of in this transition phase where we will have QAS self-study, which is the new designation. We will have QAS as a designation, and we will have self-study as a designation. So if you are QAS or if you are registry self-study, those are the two that you will use until you make the transition and you become QAS self-study.
Okay. So then take that to the next step. So if we apply for that transition today, but the standards aren't going to be applied to 2014, right?
No, the standards are applied today. Any current courses.
Current courses, but
Current
they don't have to
courses.
be in effect fully until 2014, right?
Correct. That's the cutoff of making that transition into the new standards.
Okay. So if I send in that transition today, and the question earlier was being denied, don't we really have that period until 2014 to clarify that, rather than being denied today and then saying that's it? So in essence, it's almost like closing the door.
Oh, the door wouldn't necessarily be closed. If you're denied the transition the first time you try, you just try again. This isn't, there's not a waiting period. If there were findings, if there were significant findings during the transition review that we do, if there are not significant findings, you're going to be approved and you're going to be able to utilize that QAS self-study designation. If there are significant findings, we're going to send it back to you and say, this is denied, go back to your courses, make sure that you've covered these bases, because we're going to give you a list of things that we have found in there that weren't compliant. And we're going to allow you some time to do it, but we're not putting a time limit on you. Typical denials, whenever we have an initial application that comes in, we say you can't come back to us for 6 months. That's not the case with the QAS transition. We're looking to help our sponsors to get to that point where they are compliant with the new standards and current with the new standards so that they can move forward using the new designation. If you're denied, take the time you need to look at your courses and then fill that form out again, send it back in to us, and we'll go through it just as quickly as we can.
We have some courses that are compliant under the new standards based on we started implementing, but we also have courses that are obviously compliant under the old standards. Now, as we're transitioning, we're going to be going through all our old courses and things like that, but if we have some courses that are compliant now, can we apply for the transition and then just bring our old courses and then reapply for those courses and add those on later? Or do we have to have all of our courses under the new standards before we can apply for the transition?
We recommend that you have all of your courses.
Okay, so we have to wait for all of our courses to be up before we can apply.
Right. We're looking for a complete course list. Whenever we send you our request, we're looking for a complete course list, and we will randomly choose which courses get reviewed.
Have you received applications and course lists from sponsors to date?
Yes, we have.
How are they looking?
Hit or miss.
Any other questions? Well, I would encourage you to continue with your questions as we go to lunch. And I'm going to ask if the National Registry staff in the room would please stand so that you guys could get a visual of who these individuals are. Miki, you don't stand, but we're okay there. But if you guys would, please, I encourage you to continue to dialogue over lunch with these individuals so that you can get additional questions answered. We're actually about 5 minutes early, and so I know that I don't want to be the one standing between you and lunch, so we will break for lunch and start back here promptly at 1:15. Thank you for this morning.